All right, so today we have the thesis defense of Miss Annika Norris. And I'm Cheryl Briggs, I'm her committee chair. And I would like to introduce the rest of the committee. That would be Michael Cabrera and Joanne Adams. And we have a couple of rules for just, housekeeping. Please keep your cameras off until the end when there's questions. If you are welcome to turn your camera on. We first will have Annika present, and then the committee will ask their questions first, and then I'll open it up to any attendees for comments or questions as well. And then at that point, we will go into a breakout room where the committee will discuss, and we will then come and retrieve Annika back. So you're welcome to hang out with Annika during that time period. And then we will come get her and bring her in. Right, so without further ado, I'm going to ask the committee members to turn off their cameras, and everybody please stay muted, and we will let Annika present.
I forgot to hold on. Okay. All right. Hello. Hi. I'm Annika. This is my film, Easy Prey.
You may want to hide your floating meeting controls at the top.
Yep, I am going to do that. Thank you.
And then don't forget when you share your video to share with sound. I'm just going to.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, cool. So yeah, my film is a 3D animated action comedy. It's about stereotypes, expectations, and portrayals of strength. And the original idea was sparked by the use of tropes as a tool for communication and our responsibility when using those tropes in the media commonly and when we should undermine them. And it was inspired by my personal journey in healing my relationship with femininity and its societal performance growing up, especially as a young girl into a preteen. And the log line for my film is, if you rely on stereotypes, you will find yourself in trouble. So as a brief overview, so the story is that a young professional dancer is hurrying home from rehearsal when she has to take a detour home. She's intercepted in the alleyway by two men who clearly intend to rob her, and they obviously think that they have the upper hand, and so does the audience, but they were too quick to judge. The dancer cleanly wins the ensuing fight, leaving the attackers to nurse their wounds in the alley while she continues on her way. So tropes. Some of the ones that I wanted to kind of touch on with my film is the one that kind of started it all with the idea of joint cracking equaling strength, when the big tough guy comes out and kind of cracks his knuckles and his neck and whatnot. It's a very quick shorthand to let the audience know, hey, this guy means business, this guy is scary. While I was working on my thesis, because there is a fight sequence in it, a lot of times the idea of the dance battler came up. And that's something that I actually wanted to avoid. Because the idea is that she's more dimensional than just the box of ballerina. So her fighting style is a little bit more grounded, though she does still use her grace and her strength from dance in order to fight. Then you also have the damsel in, damsel out of distress kind of tropes that go together. She is a damsel out of distress. She gets herself out of the situation, like Elizabeth Swann in the Pirates movies, or Leia, a little bit Princess Leia in Star Wars. She helps herself get out. And then you have the Mary Sue, highly criticized, where the main character seems to suddenly magically have the ability, not always with magic, but sometimes it seems that way, to overcome whatever situation she's in. And I didn't want to lean into that either. The groundwork for her victory is set up right in the beginning, and so it feels right that she's able to win. And then I'm not like other girls. This is something that I really kind of came to know more about while I was doing my film, not necessarily for the film, but it was something that I realized was important to me and that I guess my subconscious was telling me about the whole time. So I'm not like other girls is that idea of the protagonist rejecting femininity in being morally right. So you've got like Taylor Swift's like, she's cheer captain, I'm on the bleachers, she wears high heels, I wear sneakers. it's the protagonist who's projecting femininity. They're more complex, they're down to earth, they're a lot smarter, they read books, and they're morally superior, is what we're like kind of implied to us, and not feminine. And then you have the other girl who's generally self-centered, shallow, snobby, dumb, morally inferior. You also see her in Fairly Odd Parents with Trixie. You see it in Mean Girls. And it's we're becoming more aware of it as a society now, but it was important to me to be able to embrace the femininity of her ballerina-ness without it becoming her identity. And that was something that like even me growing up, I especially like I hated pink, or I thought I did. Anything that sparkled, anything that was, I had like a vendetta against dresses for a while. And it's because I didn't want to be seen as weak or lesser, but I didn't realize that was why yet. So kind of as I've grown more and found more worth in myself and loving the parts of myself that love rhinestones and actually do kind of like pink and purple and all that kind of thing, that's not inherently tied to our worth, which sounds like it shouldn't need to be said, but sometimes it does. So she finds her own strength without sacrificing her femininity. Yeah. So here are the original, or these are the designs for my dancer character. Because I didn't want to have her like in a ballet outfit and tutu, I had to kind of find other ways to connect her with her ballerina profession. So I have her hair up in a bun. I didn't slick it completely back. I wanted to have more visual interest in the front. And this is actually directly inspired by a hairstyle that I had when I was competing a long time ago that I will still adapt and wear to this day. Some of my friends here might recognize it. And then I wanted to give her, I experimented with body types. There's definitely some really tough issues with body image and type in the dance industry. The stereotype is the very thin, lanky, long, elegant, lithe body. And there's a lot of pressure on people who don't fit that, who may have broader shoulders or more visible muscle. And I was also inspired by dancers like Misty Copeland, who talked a lot about not just racism, but also colorism in the dance industry. And so I didn't want her to be like a porcelain pale, blonde haired, blue eyed ballerina. I wanted her to be a little bit more tan, darker hair. And I was also really influenced by the Hispanic community that I was working with around the time of my development in this stage. So here's what I ended up settling on. And we'll see more of her later. And there's the credits at the bottom, all the people who helped me create this model. Very much appreciate it. And the jacket that you see on her waist is actually not the jacket that's in the final film, but I will touch on that later. So for the attackers, I made them men because generally strength is attributed to the men or the masculine. And when you look kind of throughout history, especially in media, when you see your action heroes and whatnot. So here they are. And at first I had them as like ruffians. They were in like hoodies and ripped jeans, and they looked like scruffy hooligan, get off my lawn type kind of kids that would get yelled at. And as I was developing the story, I came to realize that they had to have more depth too, if they were also supposed to be subverting expectations. So I looked up like New York Fashion Week and stuff like that and just pulled like little hints here and there. They're not like business suits or whatever, but I wanted them to look a little bit more nice and put together to help to break that stereotype of your outward appearance correlating with your inward morality. So here's the design for Alfie, the smaller attacker. He's the apparent brains in the brains and bronze kind of duo that they have, except that not really. It turns out that he's actually a bigger threat physically than we think that he is in the beginning. And so here's Ted. He's the bigger guy. He's the big brawler that we think is going to be the big deal, and he's not. So this is them together. I used pink on Michelle, that's her name, to harken back to the ballerina pink and my own complicated history and past with the color pink. And then I also brought in purple because it's also stereotypically feminine. And then I have the blue which is analogous. It's a cool tone. It looks really good together. And it also historically was also a girl color. It was thought of as soft. And now it's the boy color. It just shows kind of how it's all a construct. But so for the two guys, I went with red and green. They're complementary. They contrast with her, but they also still work together. And that also describes their relationship to each other. They contrast, but they, in theory, work well together. They're complementary. And then they have the blue jeans to tie them kind of back in with that blue. And then I'll have a little cameo of a little extra friend. These are some of the props that I modeled. I'm just really proud of how a lot of these textures turned out. So I wanted to take a quick little second to highlight them. Yeah, so for reference and inspiration, a lot of like fun action movies, like of course everybody's inspired by Into the Spider-Verse. It was amazing. Shows like Young Justice, where they have characters who are not super powered fighting in a big way, like with Batgirl and Artemis. And then you have these really nice images of like the dark alleys. It's a little bit grungier. It's got the harsh highlights and the low shadows that really adds to that gritty tension. And then I also wanted to include the movie Leap, which is about ballerinas. It's a wild ride, and I can't say that it's one of my favorites, but it definitely showed me a lot about what inspirationally I could and couldn't do with a ballerina character. So for choreographing a fight, this was important to me. I didn't want it to just be a fight for fight's sake. I wanted it to have meaning. I wanted it to have purpose and direction. So I got a lot of inspiration, like I mentioned earlier, from Young Justice with the characters Batgirl and Artemis, who later becomes Tigress. And then with Gorgeous, my friend in the industry actually sent me this fight as inspiration. She was like, yeah, just watch this little 2-3 minute part of it. And I watched the whole 10-minute thing like twice in a row. It was fantastic. It had really good pacing, really good humor, and it showed me a lot more about how to like use the environment and to use the two characters playing off of each other. So I also incorporated that into their fighting styles. So Alfie, the little guy, he's a lot quicker, he's sharper. And then the big guy, Ted, he's a big lumbering, brawling, he telegraphs everything he's going to do. It's very sloppy. And so she's able to dodge him pretty easily. So the point shoes I wanted to touch on, they're easily recognizable. They're pretty stiffly structured, and they're a pretty typical symbol of femininity. And if you look up any like dance related merch, you're going to find point shoes or ballerinas. And so I actually wanted to take a quick little moment to say that there are two kinds of ballet shoes. There's the ballet slipper, which is mine's made of canvas. It's very flexible. It's really just kind of to elongate your leg and to give you a surface to turn against. And then you have the point shoe, which is very structured. It's made of layers of compacted cardboard. And so this is what my dancer has. You don't really want to get smacked by that. And it also provided quite the technical challenge with animating the ribbon. And so that was a whole thing that I will get into now. So there were a lot of needs that the rigs needed to be able to do. So like when she has it in one hand, she uses her point shoes like nunchucks. I don't remember if I've said that yet. She uses her point shoes like nunchucks. And she has them in a pocket on the outside of her duffel. So that's another clear indicator of, hey, ballerina, you can see them. Originally they were inside, I moved them outside, and I thought that helped communicate a lot better. It also made it easier for her to get them out of the bag. Win-win. So one of the rigs needed to be able to, she has to hold them in both hands and then simulate the ribbon in between. So I found and sort of kind of came up with this with the help of Christina Christie and some online tutorials, this idea of a wire simulator that drove a mesh. And it was really cool and really exciting. Ignore the glitching at the end. We did kind of end up coming up with a solution for that, except that it wasn't actually able to be put into the film itself. We had some technical issues that it just didn't end up working. And so I still wanted to include it because it was a really important like technical aspect of me working on this film. I learned a lot about physical simulations, wire deformers, blend shapes, the whole rigging shebang when it comes to props. So this is the complicated diagram of how it worked. You had the wire driving a mesh that drove another mesh that was anchored at the two ends. And I do still think that it has applications elsewhere. I just didn't have the time within the scope of the project to be able to kind of address that and figure that out. So I still think it was a really cool thing that I did, even if it's not in the final project. This is a test of what it would have looked like. I just think it's neat. So what we ended up doing instead, Melissa Klapka helped me out, and Professor Cheryl Briggs, is making a rig with a spline, the same as a character's spine. So you can move each end and then also animate in the middle independently. So I was able to attach each shoe to each hand. This is before I smoothed it, so it looks a little chonky. And then after all these are following the hands, I was able to animate in the middle. There's also two other rigs that I definitely, if I do say so myself, transition between in the film. And those allow the character to hold it in one hand and swing it around and make appealing arcs in the other. Not on the other, but on the other end of the rig. And then I worked on the duffel bag. This is where I learned a lot more about like blend shapes and stuff like that. It was also quite a challenge to work with, but I'm, happy enough with the results. I don't want to be a rigger, but it was important to me that I understand the rigging process as someone who will be participating in the larger pipeline. So the cloth simulation, I mentioned the jacket, right? Originally, I was going to simulate it using Maya's inherent program in cloth. These are some of my early experiments. The top one is lower poly, the bottom one is higher poly, which actually ended up making it look a lot chunkier. But I also had double-sided it, which was not recommended, but it wasn't giving me what I wanted. These are my layout characters. So the stand-ins that I used. So instead, I learned how to use Marvelous Designer, which is this really cool fabric simulation program where you take 2D cutouts, templates, and you can tell the program where to sew it, where to pin it, and then it simulates the physics in your 3D window. And it was really tough to kind of get the hang of, and I still have a lot more to learn about it, but I ended up coming up with a pretty good pipeline that let me simulate the cloth really quickly, much more quickly than Maya's in cloth did. And I ended up with a pretty good system once I figured out how to get it to work. So it's a simulation program, so you don't model it like you would in Maya. You have to create it in the space. And there's ways to cheat it, but this was the way I physically tied it in my simulation that I found would work the best. And I had a lot of technical difficulties getting this to work too. This shows one of the ways that I attached it to the character. I later found out a better way where I can attach pin to avatar. Beautiful. And these are some of the settings that I use because I also had to figure out the physical simulation properties. But I had a really good time figuring it out, and I'm so happy with the result. I really am. Yeah, so I definitely want to be experimenting more with this later. And I will be. I actually also worked on my classmate Sana's film, and I hope to work on some of my other classmates' films and some personal projects. So the audio is important, of course. The music is inspired by largely Swan Lake on my end. I worked with composer Dr. Zachary Bramble, and I wanted it to be an orchestral piece, ballerina, and a ballet. So that's really the focus of the sound, is the orchestral piece that's playing behind her. And it was important to me to really look at the pacing and the energy of the piece, which Zachary was very helpful with. We went back and forth a lot. He was very open-minded and also had a lot of really great ideas himself. And one of the other kind of themes that I talked to him about was that I wanted Michelle to be represented by the winds. And then Alfie, so the smaller guy, he's represented by the high brass, and then Ted, the bigger guy, is represented by the low brass. Bigger, heavier kind of stacks in that kind of way, and then the melodies can kind of play off of each other. And then I also use the music to increase tension, of course, get your dissonance in there, and then also help to release the tension sometimes, because it is an action comedy. There are funny moments in it. And so the music and the visuals need to play together to make it intense when it's intense and not when it's not. And then when it comes to the Foley, I kept it pretty light because the focus was mostly on the music, but there are moments like when she first enters the alley where you hear her footsteps, which cues into how a lot of us, especially those who present as women, become really hyper aware of your surroundings, of every sound, of anything that could be moving in the distance, because you feel unsafe and you're hyper aware, hyper alert, and everything seems louder. And then it also emphasized some of the hits, some of the fun action parts, and I got help from another person in the industry, Omar Zaki. So that was really nice to have him help me out there. With the rendering and the color, rendering was a nightmare. There were a lot of technical issues, but Cheryl Briggs acted as my render wrangler and saved my life over and over again. So with the outside of the alleyway, the city block, it's a bit brighter. You can't like see super far, but it's just a street at night. And the colors aren't too saturated. They're pretty white balanced, with some hints of like some of the purples and the pinks. And then once we get into the alley, things get darker, things get a lot more purple in the shadows, a lot more orange and pink in the highlights. It becomes this a little bit more hyper real, sort of expanded, exaggerated perception of what the alleyway might feel like, especially from a more colorful perspective. And so I wanted to pull the purples from her outfit to tie her into the environment, because she's not actually as out of place there as she might seem at first. So going forward, in going through this process of having a film that I am making over the course of years, this is by far the longest project that I've ever worked on, and it's really kind of amazing to think that I've worked on it for so long. But when talking about it with people who are interested in what I'm doing, I noticed that a lot of people really have no idea what the animation industry looks like, what goes on behind the curtains. And when I talk about it with people and try to explain it a little bit more, I find that really fascinating. And a lot of times the person I'm talking to does as well. And so I want to lean into that. In addition to getting some experience in the industry, I also have been thinking about making my own small independent animation studio that would be online based. We would make shorts and then behind the scenes content to sort of help break down that barrier between the people behind the scenes and the people who get to view it at home. And not only does that give the viewers at home a better idea of what goes on and just kind of breaking those barriers in general, but it also helps to increase the appreciation for the art. A lot of people have no idea how much work goes into it and the differences between 2D and 3D animation. It's a really complicated, long, difficult process. And I think that there's the market of people who want to know more. So that's something that I am really interested in pursuing. So with that, I will go share my film. Well, I'm going to stop the share first, and then I'm going to go find it. Okay. And the music does start as soon as we see visuals of the animation. So if you guys are not hearing that, definitely let me know. Yeah. Share sound, that's the video. Yeah, okay. Here we go.
Hide your controls.
Hide my controls. Thank you. Okay. There you have it. There are some parts here and okay, sorry. Some parts here and there I'll have to go back in and re-render, but some little mistakes here and there, so apologies for those. But for the whole, like there it is. Thanks for coming.
Annika, right on 30 minutes. Good job. Right, so if we could get the committee back, and I'll open up the floor to questions from them first. Just Joanne.
Annika, you've learned so much. Can you tell the audience where you started and how many of these challenges are the first time you've ever attempted to solve them?
When I applied to the program, I had learned what a character rig was about a month before that. I'd been downloading models and I was like, what are all of these funky circles and shapes on all of these things? I don't know what to do with these. Here I am now. I had almost no rigging experience. My rigging experience was, here's a joint. So that's not super. And yeah, so almost everything was encountering it for the first time. I didn't know how to build a scene. I didn't know how to set things up. I didn't know what layout was. It was quite the learning journey. And honestly, one of the biggest things that I learned was how to figure out how to ask what I didn't know, and how to get help that way. Figure out what I didn't know, how to ask, and then how to get help that way. Yeah.
And then my second question has to do with the idea of visual versus audio rhythm. Because music is so important to your film, how did you connect them?
I started with the feeling of the pacing, the emotional tension, the speed, the ebb and the flow. And then from there, I marked out, because I think most of you'll probably know that I was in band. So I do have a both musical and dance background. So feeling the music is something that I've always really had a thing for. So when I was thinking of the pacing of the film, what needed to be a high, what needed to be a low, I was able to translate that into, okay, this should be a little bit faster. This should be a little bit slower. I need some dissonance here. It should get quieter. It should get louder. And I was able to work with my composer to talk about that. And that's a lot of where the idea for the waltz came from. That was an intentional decision made so that the two of them would kind of be dancing without dancing. They go to the beat of the waltz while they're still doing fight moves.
Cool. Thank you.
All right, Michael, you have any questions?
I have some tech, at least one technical, and I have also one about the music. Technically, you've come a long way in this project, but there obviously is still some technical issues that I visually see in what you've produced today. not just with the dynamic simulations that you're working with, but also with some of the animation. How are you going to analyze what you have now and going forward and creating more of a collective idea with your animation, and how you're going to actually produce animation in further projects?
Honestly, the biggest thing was the pipeline. There was so much that I didn't know until it became a problem. So now that I have a better idea of how things work further on in the pipeline, I can set things up better earlier on. Like my first shot, I had to set up 3 separate times because I didn't know how to scale it properly. And in trying to figure out how to set up all these scenes, this led to a lot of weird errors and nodes in the file code that Cheryl had to help me delete out so that they would even render. But this also led to constraints being wrong. So sometimes things jump when they're not supposed to. Or the other thing is when I took on a lot. This was I was much bigger than the plate. And I think that in the future, asking for more help so that there is less pressure on me and I have more time to put towards the things that I am doing, so that I can give more care and more time to the animation and stuff like that.
Okay. I kind of will go kind of down the same line as what Joanne did with the music. I guess my general question about the music and the composition that you have here, do you feel that it really actually conveys the emotional drive of the actual piece itself? I feel it personally. I feel that watching this piece and listening to music, I don't get the same sense.
I think that there's a couple points in the song that aren't quite like how I had it in my brain that I might want to talk with the composer about to tweak later. But I think otherwise, yeah, I think that for the most part, like the drum rolls, the dissonance, the pacing, I think that it complements it pretty well. Um, could you elaborate a little bit what you mean by that it's not?
Well, I think that in some, I would have to agree with you. I think it's not the entire composition. I think it's there are moments in the composition where there's a divergence between the upbeat take of the actual music and what's actually happening within the visual screening of your piece. And so there's, in some sections, there are some slight disconnects between what we're seeing and what we're hearing. And obviously you just, said that you've obviously recognized those too. I don't think it's the entire piece per se. I just think that it's, little moments in time. It's very much just like everything else. There's just little moments in time that just could be tweaked and brought more into a fuller understanding of exactly what the visuals and the audio have to do married together, and presented. So.
Oh, yeah, I agree.
All right, that's it for me.
Okay, I have one question for you. Knowing what you know now, what else would you do differently on this project besides asking for help? Like, how would you approach, or are there things that you would have done sooner?
Yeah, I think learning what my process was important. I think that for me personally, I wish I'd gotten into the 3D space sooner. It's a lot more difficult for me to visualize what's happening in 2D. So I think I spent more time in storyboards and not quite enough time in layout. The really difficult part was trying to mitigate everything that had to get done with burnout. I dealt with a lot of burnout on and off throughout the past 3.5 years. And so trying to balance taking care of myself, learning when to recognize hey, I'm burning out, I need to take a step back, and actually that's going to help me be more productive later, would have been really good to have known earlier. But I mean, we all have to learn about ourselves. So
Yep. All right. Any questions from, well, first the committee, Joanne, do you have any more questions, or Michael?
Oh, I
Anything
wanted to
additional?
ask Annika, she mentioned something about working with a Hispanic community. And what were you doing? How were you doing that?
I was the secretary at my church, and
Okay.
the church also, we lent our property to a school for children with autism that largely catered to the Hispanic community. So it was not run by us, they used our property. But because I was there all day, I was there around all of the teachers, all of the kids, and most of them were part of the Hispanic community. Some of them, English was a second language, and getting to know them and kind of, it influenced me more than I realized at the time.
How did it change your opinion to the point of wanting to make the ballerina reflect it?
It really, so I grew up in a very white area. So to be not in a majority white area, it made me more aware of that, sort of just more racially aware in a sense of that kind of a thing. And then that in combination with Misty Copeland, specifically in the dance world, how it's also very white and pale. So
Right. I mean, a lot of your the basis of your film is talking about stereotype.
mhm.
So you're anti-stereotype in terms of design of your character, right?
Yeah.
So anti-stereotype in terms of design of your antagonists,
Mm-hmm.
but not exactly. So there's some need or usage of stereotype, and what exactly is
Yeah.
your realization about that?
So tropes aren't all good or all bad, they're just a tool. And we
Mhm.
just need to be aware of when we're using them, when they're being overused, and the influence that we have on media. Like there are studies showing that young kids, when they are introduced to and primarily shown very gendered media, it influences the way that they present their own gender and the way that they have expectations of their roles in society and how they should act. And so the more kind of diversity that we can have out there, the more likely we'll have people that can see more of themselves and show a wider range of what you could be. So like my dancer has larger shoulders. I had some friends in dance who were made to be very self-conscious about the fact that they had larger shoulders, that they had visible muscle. So it's sometimes it's the little things that we don't think of that we need to think of. And like, I'm not perfect. I've got a long way to go too. I'm still learning, but those are some of the little things that I've kind of tried to become more aware of.
And then I think the last thing, just talking about your ideas of their stereotype and representation, you do bring up the idea of feminism and femininity.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you lie in the discussion in terms of I know that you're saying that this is somewhat of a reclamation of femininity, in your sense of, do you think it's a sense of feminism, or do you think it's just a cultural bias against women who appear feminine?
I think that the two go hand in hand. And I also think that with my piece specifically, you have the idea of the rejection of femininity to be strong. And then you have the like over embracement, the utilization of femininity to be strong.
Mhm.
And I was hoping that my film would land, I was aiming for somewhere in the middle where she is strong and also has feminine parts to her. They can both exist without necessarily like being inherent to each other. They're not reliant on each other. They don't have to be. You can be feminine or not feminine and strong or not strong. It's
And
up
so
to you.
my question is, like, do you have the context of feminist thought or theory?
Oh,
I'll
yeah,
back that up.
definitely. Names are escaping me right now. I remember The Heroine's Journey, that book, she talked a lot about when you reject the femininity, embrace the masculinity for strength, and then you go, oh, hey, wait a second, there's more to this than that.
Mhm.
I think it was Maureen. It was just, yeah. And then there's some newer voices like on YouTube. Sarah Zed did a whole YouTube essay about The Other Girl, and that was really eye-opening for me in my journey, and embracing that kind of thing. Like for a while, I was self-conscious carrying around a sparkling cup. Like somehow the fact that I had a cup that sparkled was reflected on my self-worth. Like that's silly.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how that's tied in.
That's where I wanted you to go.
Thank you for getting
I got one.
Okay.
So Joanne opened this up. I'll walk right through that door.
Here's the door.
So stereotypes, right? And
Uh-huh.
you're talking about the tropic stereotype of what you presented in your presentation today between the strong woman and the not so strong woman. Your vision for this and what you've actually presented today is that a new foundation of ideology and stereotyping of individuals should go out the window, and we should actually accept a strong woman who can be feminine as the new norm. Is that not already being done, and is actually that not already becoming the gendered stereotype? Let's take, for example, the Marvels movie that just released.
Yeah, exactly.
We have three individuals in that film that portray women in different roles, and yet they're all three of them are strong. We have a minority in there. We have a lot of stuff actually happening in film today that's actually breaking the stereotype that you're trying to break with your imagery.
Yeah.
Is this becoming now the new stereotype for casting roles within the film industry, or do you think that there's yet another way of breaking out of this norm and tropic idea of what a woman truly is within the acting world? Go.
Yeah, I mean, it all comes in waves. The wave that we're in right now is like you said, it's opening up the door for a lot more women who can be strong in different ways, and I think that that's wonderful. Everything that we do, everything that I've done relies on the work of those who've come before me, and I just hope to add my voice to that new choir to continue to increase that kind of representation. And as far as swinging back one way or the other, we had our first wave where you had to reject the household, you had to reject the skirts, you had to reject everything like that. And then we kind of swung the other way where it's like, okay, well, now reject the work and you're not allowed. So it's all about finding that balance.
So you're believing that this is a cyclical event and not necessarily a linear event.
It's definitely not linear. I don't know if it's quite cyclical, but it definitely will have its ups and downs as it kind of tries to find back. It's not back, but find a center. And, as society changes, that'll get tipped one way or the other. But I hope that we can have an area where women and men and non-binary folk can all find their comfort and confidence in whatever they decide to do or pursue, whoever they are, kind of separately or not from how they identify. It's should be a wide range. People should feel comfortable being very girly or not girly, or staying at home or not staying at home, or fighting like in the Marvel movies or not fighting like in the Marvel movies. So I hope to see more of that. But with my film specifically, it did lean in a lot more to portrayals of dancers and not just women as a whole. So women as a whole, I definitely agree, we're seeing a lot more diversity there. But the dance imagery, especially in animation, is still a lot more limited. So I'm hoping to see that open up more. Hopefully that answered.
Yeah, I see where you're going. Yeah. I mean, obviously there's a lot more discussion there, but you
Yeah,
know,
I mean,
it's, you know, I see what you're trying to project in what you're saying.
okay, cool.
All right, so we can open up the floor now to comments and questions from all the attendees.
Hello, attendees.
There's a lot of comments. I don't know if you want me to read the chat for you.
Yeah, I've been scrolling through them. They're very nice. I appreciate everybody coming. It means a lot.
Anybody have anything to say?
I do.
It's
Hi,
nice.
Elena.
Hi. Congratulations, Annika. First of all, I know that this is like a huge learning curve, aka like the whole project was a learning curve because just getting started, and what a way to come out of the gates. I just wanted to bring up one tiny moment in the film that I really, really enjoyed as a fellow dancer. Obviously, I enjoyed the whole film as a fellow dancer, but in the very beginning, when she looks back at the cat and then she like turns back around, that little like attention to detail, like the moment in that animation where she kind of does like, I don't know, I guess it's a head turn, but it really felt like a dance move. So I liked how you communicated her dancer background through her body language, even before she was fighting. Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate you pointing out that shot specifically because I wrestled with it for a really, really, really long time. So I appreciate that you noticed it.
Yeah, and I'm glad you did. It was very pleasant. It looked
Thank you.
like she was on stage. Yeah. But yeah, good job.
Thanks, Elena. Anybody else?
Can you hear me or no?
Yeah.
Yes.
Hi,
Okay.
Jamie.
Hi, Annika. I just wanted to say, hold on. I wanted to say congratulations. This has been a long time coming. It is finally here, and I'm so proud to see the film that you made. You did a lot of work within the film. I saw you struggle. I saw you succeed. I saw you throughout the whole process, and I just want to say how proud I am.
Thanks, Jamie.
All right. Anybody else? If not, I'm going to open up the breakout room for Joanne, Michael, and myself. And the rest of you can hang out and turn your cameras on and chat with Annika, or go ahead and leave, up to you. And we will come and get you. I will come out and get you when we're ready to hop back in. Okay.
Okay, sounds good.
I just have to join it myself. Oh, I gotta stop.
In the recording, yep.
Thank you.